You're about to watch a long-form documentary about the vending machine business. This is not a tutorial, and it's not a motivational video. There are no hacks, no guarantees, and no promises of fast money. Instead, this is a slow, practical look at how vending machines actually function, as a business model, as a form of everyday infrastructure, and as a side hustle that has quietly existed for decades. If you've ever walked past a vending machine and briefly wondered who owns it, how it makes money, or why it's placed exactly where it is, you're already asking the right questions. Most people have that thought for a moment. Then they move on. Vending machines tend to fade into the background of daily life. They sit in office buildings, hospitals, schools, factories, and transit spaces. They don't advertise themselves. They don't explain what they are. They simply exist. And yet, every vending machine represents a set of business decisions. Someone purchased the machine. Someone negotiated the location. Someone chose what goes inside it, how often it gets stocked, and how much each item costs. Someone deals with the machines that jam, the locations that don't perform, and the slow accumulation of small, steady revenue. This documentary is about that layer of ownership and decision-making. We'll look at where vending machines came from, how unattended retail became normal, why the business works at all, and what the day-to-day reality looks like for people who operate vending routes, sometimes as a side hustle, sometimes as a long-term business. Some sections focus on history, some focus on economics, some focus on the practical realities people don't talk about much. You don't need to give this your full attention the entire time. The structure is designed so you can listen closely, or let parts of it play in the background and still follow the larger picture. If you're an entrepreneur or side hustle curious, this will give you a realistic sense of what vending businesses actually involve. Without exaggeration. If you're simply curious, this will explain a system you've likely interacted with hundreds of times without ever really thinking about it. Before we talk about numbers, locations, or machine types, it's useful to start with one simple observation. Some businesses don't compete for attention. They don't need to. They operate best when they blend into the environment and go mostly unnoticed. Vending machines are a clear example of that, and understanding why they fade into the background is the first step toward understanding how the business works at all. There's a well-documented pattern in how the brain handles familiar systems. When something behaves consistently, when it doesn't demand immediate response, the brain gradually reduces how much attention it gives it. This isn't distraction. It's efficiency. Psychologists often describe this as attentional drift. When the environment feels predictable, the brain stops scanning for problems. It lowers alertness. Focus softens. This is why you can drive a familiar route and barely remember the details. Why the sound of an air conditioner disappears after a few minutes. Why certain background noises fade almost completely from awareness. The brain decides that nothing urgent is happening, and it reallocates attention elsewhere. Predictable systems allow this to happen. They don't surprise you. They don't force decision-making. They behave the same way every time. Vending machines are built around this principle. They look the same day after day. They're in the same location. They respond the same way when used. You don't need to think about how they work in order to use them. Because of that, your attention relaxes around them. This is one of the reasons vending machines succeed as a business. They don't compete for focus. They don't interrupt behavior. They wait until they're needed. From a business perspective, this matters. Systems that don't require attention are easier to accept. They create less resistance. They integrate more smoothly into daily routines. From a listening perspective, the same principle applies here. This documentary is structured to mirror that predictability. Chapters follow a consistent rhythm. Topics unfold gradually. Nothing requires urgent focus. You can listen actively, or you can let parts of it drift past you. If your attention wanders, that's expected. You're not missing something critical. The systems we're talking about continue to function whether or not anyone is watching them closely. So does this story. You don't need to track every detail to understand the larger picture. If something catches your interest, you can focus in. If it doesn't, you can let it pass. That flexibility is intentional. Attentional drift isn't a failure of focus. It's a sign that the environment feels stable. And vending machines, as a business, depend on that stability. They work because people don't have to think about them very much. As we move forward, we'll look at ownership, economics, and operations, but always through that same lens. Businesses that succeed without demanding attention tend to last a long time. And understanding how that works starts with understanding how attention naturally softens around predictable systems. Most businesses spend a great deal of effort trying to be noticed. They advertise. They brand. They explain who they are and why you should choose them. Vending machines do almost none of this. They don't promote the business behind them. They don't explain ownership. They don't try to build loyalty. In many cases, the name of the operator isn't visible at all. This is unusual. Most small businesses rely on recognition and repeated persuasion. Vending machines rely on placement and availability. They don't sell the business. They sell access. A vending machine is usually encountered after the decision has already been made. Someone is hungry. Someone is thirsty. Someone is waiting. The machine doesn't convince them to want something. It simply happens to be there when they do. This changes how the business functions. There's no need to create urgency, no need to differentiate aggressively, no need to explain value. The machine waits. In practical terms, this means vending operators don't compete for attention the way most entrepreneurs do. They compete quietly through location. A machine placed in the right spot can operate for years, with almost no public awareness of who owns it or how it works. That anonymity is not a weakness. It's part of the design. When people don't think about a business, they don't question it much. They don't compare it constantly to alternatives. They don't evaluate it emotionally. They use it when they need it and move on. For an operator, this creates a very different relationship with customers. There are no reviews to manage, no social media presence to maintain, no public narrative to control. The work happens behind the scenes: stocking, maintenance, accounting, location management. The business succeeds not because it's visible, but because it's reliable. Vending machines are built to exist without explanation. They don't introduce themselves. They don't announce improvements. They don't promise anything beyond function. That restraint allows them to blend into environments where attention is already divided: offices, hospitals, factories, schools. In those spaces, anything that demands attention risks becoming an annoyance. A machine that waits quietly is tolerated, often welcomed. This is why vending machines persist in places where more aggressive businesses would struggle. They fit into routines rather than interrupting them. And from an entrepreneurial perspective, that's an important distinction. A business that doesn't advertise shifts effort away from persuasion and toward execution. Success depends less on messaging and more on placement, upkeep, and patience. The machine doesn't chase customers. It waits for them to arrive on their own terms. And that waiting, steady, uneventful, and mostly unnoticed, is not an accident. It's the strategy. Before we move further, it's worth being clear about what kind of video this is. This is a long, slow documentary. It's structured to move steadily, without urgency, and without trying to hold your attention at every moment. That's intentional. You don't need to watch this the way you'd watch a short explainer or a tutorial. You don't need to follow every sentence closely. You don't need to remember everything. Some people will listen actively, out of curiosity or business interest. Others will let it play in the background while working, resting, or falling asleep. Both ways of listening are valid. The systems we're talking about don't require constant attention to function, and this documentary doesn't either. If you're an entrepreneur or someone curious about side hustles, you're very much welcome here. This video will talk honestly about money, ownership, locations, costs, and trade-offs. It will explain how vending machines make money, where they don't, and why the business attracts a certain type of operator. What it won't do is rush you. There are no promises of quick returns, no exaggerated success stories, no pressure to take notes or act immediately. That's not because the subject isn't practical. It's because understanding this kind of business takes time. Vending machines reward patience more than intensity, observation more than urgency. This pacing reflects that reality. If something catches your interest, you can focus in. If your attention drifts, you won't lose the thread entirely. Each chapter stands on its own, and the larger picture emerges gradually. There's nothing here you need to decide tonight. Nothing you need to optimize. Nothing you need to act on right away. The goal is understanding, not activation, so you're free to listen closely or loosely, to stay awake, or let this play while you rest. This documentary is meant to sit alongside you, not demand anything from you. As we move forward, we'll talk about ownership, economics, history, and daily routines, always at the same steady pace. And if at any point you find yourself drifting, that's not a problem. It means the structure is doing its job. Because the businesses we're examining don't rely on attention to survive. They operate whether anyone is watching or not. And this story is built the same way. At some point, almost everyone has the same realization. It happens quietly, usually in passing. You're standing in front of a vending machine or walking past one, and a simple thought occurs. Someone owns this, not the building, not the company whose logo might be on the machine. An individual. Someone made a decision to buy it, to place it here, to keep it filled. That realization changes how the machine looks. It stops being part of the background and starts to look like a small business. Every vending machine represents an upfront purchase. Someone paid for the equipment, new or used, cheap or expensive. Someone arranged delivery. Someone figured out where it would go. Then comes the ongoing work. Someone stocks it. They choose what products go inside. They decide how often to return. They notice what sells and what doesn't. They deal with expired items, jammed spirals, and machines that stop taking payment at the worst possible time. And finally, someone collects the money. Not all at once, not dramatically. Small amounts, gathered over time. Bills, coins, digital payments settling quietly in an account. This is where vending machines start to feel different from most businesses. There's no storefront, no staff on site, no visible sales process. The business operates while the owner is somewhere else, at work, at home, on another route. That separation is what makes people curious. The idea that something can earn money without requiring constant presence. But that separation is also misleading. The machine doesn't run itself. It depends on placement, maintenance, and consistency. Someone has to show up regularly. Someone has to care whether it's working. The realization isn't that vending machines are magical. It's that they're ordinary, but organized differently. They turn routine demand into routine income. Not through persuasion, but through availability. This is why vending machines attract a certain type of person, people who are comfortable with systems, people who prefer maintenance over marketing, people who don't mind repetition. The business doesn't reward excitement, it rewards follow-through. Once you see a vending machine this way, it's hard to unsee it. Every machine becomes a question. Who owns this one? How often is it stocked? Is this a good location or a bad one? Is it earning steadily or barely at all? That moment of realization is usually brief, but for some people it lingers. And that lingering question is where the business actually begins. Most businesses depend on being seen. They have a name out front, a website, a brand voice, some way of signaling ownership and identity. Vending machines usually have none of that. In many cases, there's no sign indicating who owns the machine at all. No brand story, no attempt to be recognized. From the outside, the business is almost anonymous. This is intentional. Vending machine ownership separates income from identity. The machine doesn't introduce the owner. It doesn't build a relationship. It doesn't ask for trust in the traditional sense. It simply performs a function. For some entrepreneurs, this is a drawback. For others, it's the appeal. There's no need to manage public perception, no reviews to respond to, no expectation of personality or engagement. The work happens away from the point of sale. Ownership shows up in quieter ways, in the choice of location, in how often the machine is serviced, in whether it's clean, stocked, and functioning. Income arrives without recognition. Sales accumulate without applause. Returns are measured privately, not publicly. This changes the emotional experience of running the business. There's less external validation, but also less exposure. No one knows when a machine is having a bad week. No one comments when sales dip. No one celebrates when things go well. The numbers exist, but they exist off stage. For people who are motivated by visibility, this can feel unsatisfying. For people who value autonomy, it can feel stabilizing. The business doesn't follow the owner home in the form of messages or notifications. It doesn't demand personal presence to operate. This doesn't mean it's passive. Machines still need attention, locations still need to be managed, problems still arise. But those problems are handled privately. The separation between owner and operation creates a buffer. You can operate the business without becoming the business. That distinction matters. It allows vending to fit into lives that already have other priorities, full-time jobs, families, or other ventures. It also shapes how success is measured. Progress isn't public. Growth isn't announced. The business either works or it doesn't. And when it works, it does so quietly. Ownership without visibility strips the business down to fundamentals: placement, maintenance, patience. For some people, that's limiting. For others, it's exactly the point. Not every business appeals to the same type of person. Vending machines tend to attract a very specific group, often without trying to. This isn't a business for people who enjoy attention. It's not well suited to those who want constant feedback or who measure progress through visibility and recognition. Instead, it attracts people who are comfortable working inside systems. People who don't mind repetition. People who prefer routine to improvisation. People who are more interested in whether something functions reliably than in how it looks from the outside. Vending is a low-drama business by design. There are no launches, no campaigns, no audience to win over. Most days involve the same sequence of tasks: checking machines, restocking inventory, counting returns, fixing small problems before they become larger ones. For some people, that sounds boring. For others, it sounds manageable. The business doesn't reward persuasion. It rewards follow-through. Selling happens automatically, without conversation or negotiation. The products are already known. The prices are fixed. The demand is situational rather than emotional. This removes an entire category of effort. You don't need to convince anyone to want something. You only need to make sure it's available when they do. That makes vending especially appealing as a side hustle. It can operate alongside a full-time job, alongside family obligations, alongside other commitments. The work happens in small windows of time: early mornings, lunch breaks, evenings. There's no need to be on all the time. When a vending route is running well, it doesn't demand constant attention. Problems arise, but they tend to be practical rather than emotional. A machine jams. A product doesn't sell. A location underperforms. These are issues to be solved, not crises to be managed publicly. For people who find high-energy businesses draining, this predictability is appealing. The trade-off is that vending doesn't offer excitement. Returns are steady, not explosive. Growth is incremental, not dramatic. The business rarely surprises you, for better or worse. That predictability filters people naturally. Those who stay tend to value stability over scale, consistency over novelty, control over visibility. Vending machines don't require belief in a vision. They require willingness to maintain a system. For certain people, that's not a compromise. It's the reason they're interested in the first place. Once the idea of ownership settles in, another question usually follows. It's simple, direct, and almost unavoidable. How much does it make? Most people don't ask it out loud. They think it quietly, often while standing in front of a machine or walking away from one. It's not greed, it's curiosity. Money is the easiest way to measure whether something is real. If a machine earns nothing, it's just furniture. If it earns something, even a small amount, it becomes a business. The question lingers because vending machines don't advertise their results. There's no obvious signal of success or failure, no crowds, no empty shelves that tell the whole story. A machine that looks busy may earn very little. A machine that's barely noticed may earn steadily. There's no immediate feedback. That uncertainty is part of what makes the question stick. How much does it make per day, per week, per month? Enough to matter? Enough to be worth the effort? The instinct is to want an answer right away. A number, a range, a rule of thumb. But vending machines resist simple answers. Earnings depend on location, product mix, pricing, foot traffic, and consistency, all interacting quietly over time. Two identical machines can produce very different results. That variability is important. It's also why the business doesn't lend itself to dramatic stories. There's no universal outcome, no guaranteed return. For some operators, a machine produces steady, modest income for years. For others, it underperforms and eventually gets moved or removed. Both outcomes are common. The lingering question isn't really about the number. It's about whether the system makes sense, whether the effort matches the return, whether the trade-offs feel reasonable, whether the pace fits someone's life. Those answers don't arrive instantly. They emerge gradually, through observation and context. That's why we don't answer the question yet. Not because it's unimportant, but because answering it properly requires understanding everything around it. Cost, location, maintenance, time. We'll get there. But for now, it's enough to notice the question itself. Once it appears, it tends to stay. You start seeing machines differently. You notice where they're placed. You wonder how often they're serviced. You pay attention to whether they're full or half empty. The machine becomes less anonymous. Not because it explained itself, but because you started asking the right question. And that question, unanswered for the moment, is what pulls us forward. Long before vending machines sold food, they sold something simpler. Small items, low-risk goods, things people already understood the value of. Early coin-operated devices appeared in the late 19th century, often in public places where attendants were impractical or unnecessary. Gum, postcards, stamps, small pamphlets. You inserted a coin, you turned a handle, something dropped into your hand. The transaction was brief and impersonal. There was no conversation, no negotiation, no relationship to manage. This was a significant shift. At the time, most commerce required a person on the other side of the exchange, someone to receive payment, make change, and hand over goods. Coin-operated machines removed that requirement. They asked people to trust a mechanism instead of a clerk. That trust didn't arrive all at once. Early machines were simple by necessity. They had to be understandable at a glance. People needed to believe that if they put money in, something would come out. If a machine failed too often, it wasn't repaired quietly. It was removed. Trust was earned through repetition. The same motion, the same outcome, over and over again. These early devices worked best in places where oversight was limited and demand was predictable. Train stations, street corners, public buildings. They allowed basic goods to be sold without staffing costs. For operators, this changed the economics of selling. One machine could replace hours of human labor. It could operate continuously. It didn't require supervision, but it also introduced new risks. If the mechanism failed, sales stopped entirely. If coins jammed, money was lost. If people stopped trusting the machine, they stopped using it. This made reliability more important than novelty. Early operators learned quickly that unattended commerce depended on consistency. The machine didn't need to impress, it needed to work. This principle carried forward as machines became more complex. The success of gum and postcard machines demonstrated something essential. People were willing to transact with systems as long as those systems behaved predictably. That willingness laid the foundation for everything that followed. Food, drinks, and eventually full vending machines all depended on the same core agreement. You put money in, you get something out. No explanation required. The trust established by these early coin-operated devices wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, incremental, and built over time. But once it existed, it changed how commerce could function. Selling no longer required presence. It required reliability. And that shift, from people to mechanisms, is what made the vending machine business possible in the first place. Before vending machines were powered by electricity, they were powered by mechanics, springs, levers, gears, gravity. These early machines didn't rely on sensors, software, or screens. They relied on physical movement and simple cause and effect. A coin added weight, a mechanism shifted, a gate opened, an item dropped. The simplicity was not a limitation. It was a requirement. For unattended commerce to work, the process had to be obvious and repeatable. People needed to understand instinctively what would happen when they interacted with the machine. Mechanical vending devices made the transaction visible. You could feel the resistance of the handle. You could hear the internal movement. You could see the item fall. This transparency helped build trust. If something went wrong, the failure was usually physical and understandable. A stuck lever, a jammed coin, a blocked chute. There was no mystery. From an operator's perspective, these machines introduced a new kind of reliability. They didn't depend on moods, schedules, or staffing. They didn't call in sick. They didn't require training. If the mechanism worked, the business worked. That predictability mattered more than speed or scale. Early vending operators learned to value machines that behaved the same way every time. Not machines that were impressive, machines that were dependable. This emphasis on repeatable outcomes shaped the business model early. Maintenance became more important than innovation. Durability mattered more than design. A machine that could survive thousands of identical motions was worth more than one that offered novelty but failed often. Mechanical automation also allowed operators to expand gradually. Adding another machine didn't require hiring another person. It required installing another mechanism. Each machine functioned independently, but all followed the same logic. This modularity is one of the reasons vending scaled quietly. Operators could grow one unit at a time, learning what worked before expanding further. Electricity would later add convenience, lighting, and payment options, but the core principle was already established. Unattended commerce succeeds when outcomes are predictable. Mechanical vending proved that people were willing to trust systems as long as those systems behaved consistently. The technology was simple. The implication was significant. Selling no longer required presence or persuasion. It required a mechanism that did the same thing again and again without drawing attention to itself. That idea, reliable repetition over novelty, is still at the center of the vending machine business today. For most of history, buying something meant interacting with another person. Even simple transactions involved conversation, acknowledgement, and social exchange. Money changed hands. Goods were passed across a counter. Someone confirmed that the transaction was complete. Early vending machines removed that layer entirely. There was no greeting, no explanation, no expectation of politeness or engagement. The exchange became purely functional. This shift mattered more than it first appears. Selling without conversation changed who could sell, when selling could happen, and how often transactions could occur. A machine didn't care who the customer was. It didn't adjust its behavior. It didn't judge, persuade, or react. It offered the same outcome every time. For customers, this reduced friction. There was no pressure to buy more, no social obligation to interact, no feeling of being watched or evaluated. You could approach the machine, make a choice, and leave. That simplicity made unattended commerce feel efficient and private. For operators, removing conversation changed the cost structure of selling. Labor was no longer required at the point of sale. Hours didn't need to be staffed. Transactions could happen early in the morning, late at night, or continuously throughout the day. Commerce became something that could exist independently of schedules. This also changed the type of goods that could be sold. Early vending focused on items that required no explanation and no judgment. You didn't need advice to buy gum. You didn't need reassurance to buy a postcard. The value was obvious. Unattended commerce worked best when decisions were simple. That principle carried forward as vending expanded into food and drinks. Products needed to be familiar. Packaging needed to be clear. The transaction had to feel safe without human oversight. Selling without conversation also shifted responsibility. If something went wrong, there was no one to complain to in the moment, no clerk to ask for help, no manager to intervene. This forced operators to think differently. Machines had to be reliable. Pricing had to feel fair. Failure couldn't be common. Trust had to be built into the system itself. This was a quiet but important change in how commerce operated. It demonstrated that people were willing to transact without interaction as long as the system felt predictable and reasonable. That willingness opened the door to an entire category of businesses where selling didn't require presence. Vending machines were among the earliest examples of this shift. They proved that commerce could be automated, continuous, and largely invisible. Once that idea was accepted, it didn't stay small. It expanded, slowly at first, into a model that would eventually support food, beverages, and large-scale unattended retail. Selling without conversation wasn't a novelty. It was a new baseline. And once people became comfortable with it, there was no need to return to the old way. When vending machines began to expand beyond small paper goods, they did so cautiously. Early operators didn't experiment with complex products. They chose items that already sold themselves: candy, soda, cigarettes. These products shared a few important traits. They were familiar, they were inexpensive, they were standardized. Most importantly, they didn't require explanation. People already knew what they were buying before approaching the machine. There was no uncertainty about use, quality, or value. That familiarity reduced risk on both sides of the transaction. For customers, it felt safe. For operators, it made sales predictable. Candy was an early favorite because it was durable and shelf-stable. It didn't spoil quickly. It didn't require refrigeration. Packaging protected it from handling. Soda followed closely behind. Bottled drinks were uniform, sealed, and easy to dispense. As bottling technology improved, soda became one of the most reliable vending products available. Cigarettes, for a long time, were among the most profitable items sold through vending machines. They had consistent demand, high margins, and customers were accustomed to purchasing them without assistance. Together, these products demonstrated something critical. Unattended commerce could work at scale if the product met the right conditions. It needed to be recognizable, it needed to be consistent, and it needed to require no trust beyond the transaction itself. These early categories shaped how vending businesses developed. Machines were designed around standardized sizes and weights. Dispensing mechanisms were optimized for uniform items. Inventory management became simpler. Operators learned which products justified the effort of restocking and which ones didn't. This phase also revealed early limits. Products that were fragile, perishable, or unfamiliar didn't perform well. Anything that required explanation or customization struggled. Vending succeeded when it removed choice complexity, not when it added to it. The success of candy, soda, and cigarettes established vending as a legitimate distribution channel rather than a novelty. It wasn't just a mechanical curiosity anymore. It was a business that could support routes, operators, and long-term placement. These products proved that unattended retail could handle high volume without interaction. Once that was established, the next step was inevitable. If machines could reliably sell snacks and drinks, the question became how far the model could stretch. And that question would soon lead vending machines into new environments, factories, schools, hospitals, and transit spaces, where convenience mattered more than experience. As vending machines proved they could reliably sell basic goods, they began appearing in places with one thing in common. People were present, but choice was limited. Factories, schools, and transit hubs weren't destinations for shopping. They were places people passed through or spent time in for other reasons. That made them ideal environments for unattended commerce. In factories, vending machines filled a practical gap. Workers had scheduled breaks. Leaving the building wasn't always possible. Food options were limited by time and distance. A vending machine offered something predictable and immediate. It didn't interrupt the workday. It didn't require staffing. It fit into existing routines. Schools followed a similar pattern. Students and staff were on fixed schedules. Meals happened at set times. Between those times, access to food was limited. Vending machines became a way to extend availability without expanding services. They required no supervision during use. They operated within defined boundaries. They could be adjusted based on demand. Transit hubs introduced a different kind of constraint. People were waiting, often briefly, often with no intention of staying. Airports, train stations, and bus terminals needed options that worked quickly. Vending machines didn't require lines. They didn't require interaction. They didn't require explanation. You could make a purchase and move on. Across all of these environments, vending machines benefited from predictability. Foot traffic followed patterns. Demand rose and fell at expected times. Restocking could be planned around known schedules. For operators, this reduced uncertainty. You didn't need to guess when people would be present. You didn't need to convince anyone to stop. The environment did most of the work. These locations also shaped how vending businesses thought about placement. A good location wasn't just about volume. It was about consistency. A factory with steady shifts could outperform a busier space with irregular traffic. A school with daily attendance could be more reliable than a crowded public area. Vending machines thrived where routines already existed. They didn't create demand. They aligned with it. This alignment reinforced the core idea behind the business. Unattended commerce works best when it fits into systems that are already in motion. Factories, schools, and transit hubs weren't just convenient places to install machines. They were environments where vending made structural sense. People were already there. Time was limited. Options were constrained. The machine didn't compete with other choices. It completed the environment. Once vending established itself in these spaces, it stopped being seen as an add-on. It became expected. And when a system becomes expected, it tends to last. Once vending machines became common in factories, schools, and transit hubs, they demonstrated something important. People were willing to buy food without engagement, not because they disliked interaction, but because interaction wasn't the point. In these environments, food served a functional role. It filled time between tasks. It addressed hunger quickly. It fit into schedules that were already full. Vending machines worked because they didn't compete for attention. They didn't ask questions. They didn't suggest upgrades. They didn't slow people down. You approached the machine, made a choice, and moved on. This mattered in places where time was constrained. A factory break wasn't a social event. A school hallway wasn't a marketplace. A transit terminal wasn't a destination. Food needed to be available, not memorable. Feeding people without engagement lowered friction. There was no line to manage, no conversation to navigate, no pressure to decide quickly while someone waited. The transaction happened at the pace of the customer. For operators, this reinforced the value of unattended systems. Labor costs stayed low. Operating hours weren't limited by staffing. Sales could happen whenever people passed through. The machine didn't care if it was busy or idle. It performed the same function regardless. This also changed expectations around food itself. Vending food didn't need to be special. It needed to be reliable. People didn't approach machines looking for variety or experience. They approached them looking for certainty. Something familiar, something quick, something that fit the moment. That predictability made planning easier. Inventory choices could be standardized. Restocking schedules could be routine. Margins could be estimated with more confidence. Engagement was replaced by availability, and availability proved to be enough. Over time, this shaped how vending businesses thought about success. The goal wasn't to attract customers. It was to be present when customers already existed. The machine didn't generate demand. It captured it. This distinction separated vending from most food businesses. Restaurants rely on atmosphere, service, and engagement. Vending relies on timing and placement. That difference allowed vending to coexist alongside other food options without competing directly. It wasn't trying to replace cafeterias or cafes. It filled the gaps between them. By feeding people without engagement, vending machines found a durable role. They became part of the infrastructure of daily life, not because people loved them, but because they were useful. And usefulness, when paired with reliability, turns out to be a strong foundation for a business. Eventually, curiosity runs into a practical question. If someone owns this machine, what did it cost them to start? This is usually the first place expectations begin to change. Vending machines are not especially cheap, but they're also not mysterious or inaccessible. A basic snack or soda machine has a clear price range, and that range depends less on branding and more on condition, age, and capability. New machines cost more. They arrive clean, modern, and under warranty. They accept multiple payment types. They look professional. But they also require more upfront capital, and they take longer to earn back their cost. Used machines are more common. They're often purchased from operators who are downsizing, upgrading, or exiting the business. They may show wear, they may lack modern payment systems, but they perform the same core function. They dispense products reliably if they've been maintained properly. For many operators, used machines make the most sense. They lower the initial barrier to entry. They shorten the time it takes to recover the investment. They allow mistakes without severe consequences. Beyond the machine itself, there are secondary costs: delivery and placement, initial inventory, payment system upgrades, occasional repairs. None of these costs are dramatic on their own, but together, they form the real starting point. This is where vending begins to separate itself from more speculative side hustles. There's no sign-up button, no subscription model. You're buying a physical asset. Once the machine is placed, money doesn't flow instantly. Sales arrive slowly, in small increments. A few dollars here, a few more there. This pacing is important. Vending machines don't reward impatience. They reward consistency. The cost of a machine isn't just the purchase price. It's also the commitment to maintain it, to keep it stocked, and to respond when something goes wrong. That commitment isn't overwhelming, but it's real. This is why experienced operators often start small. One machine, one location, one routine. They learn how costs behave over time, how often repairs happen, how inventory turns over. how long it actually takes for a machine to pay for itself. The numbers don't need to be impressive to be meaningful. They need to be predictable. Understanding what a machine costs is less about finding the cheapest option and more about understanding the relationship between capital, time, and effort. Once that relationship is clear, the rest of the business starts to make sense. Once the cost of a machine is understood, the next question usually follows naturally. Where does the money actually come from? Vending machine margins are not dramatic. They don't rely on large markups or sudden spikes in demand. They rely on small differences, repeated consistently. A product is purchased in bulk. It's sold individually. The margin on each item is modest. $1 here, less than $1 there. On its own, no single sale matters very much. What matters is repetition. Margins in vending aren't designed to impress. They're designed to accumulate. This is why vending doesn't feel exciting when you first look at the numbers. There's no moment where everything changes overnight. No threshold where profits suddenly accelerate. Instead, the business settles into a pattern. A machine sells a predictable mix of items, at predictable times of day, to predictable groups of people. That predictability allows operators to estimate performance with reasonable accuracy. Not perfectly, but close enough to plan around. Margins also behave differently depending on product type. Snack items tend to have slightly higher margins. Drinks often move faster but with less room per sale. Some products sell steadily but slowly. Others sell quickly and then disappear from demand entirely. Over time, operators adjust. Not dramatically, incrementally. A product is removed. Another takes its place. Prices shift slightly. The goal isn't optimization in the abstract, it's alignment. Aligning inventory with the habits of a specific location. Margins also absorb costs quietly. Spoiled products, damaged packaging, occasional theft, machines that underperform. None of these erase the business on their own, but all of them reduce the total return. This is why vending margins are best understood over months, not days. Looking too closely, too often, makes the business feel unstable. Looking at it over longer periods reveals its actual character, steady, but limited. The lack of drama is not accidental. Vending works because expectations are low and outcomes are consistent. Operators who expect excitement tend to lose interest quickly. Operators who expect repetition tend to stay. Margins in vending reward patience. They don't demand constant adjustment. They don't require perfect timing. They require showing up, restocking, and letting the system do what it's designed to do. This is why vending often works better as a complement than a centerpiece. It fits alongside other income. It supports rather than replaces. Margins don't ask for attention. They just need time. Understanding this early prevents disappointment later. Vending machines don't make people rich. They make sense. And for a certain type of operator, that's enough. At some point, vending machine economics encounter another party, the location owner. This is where the business becomes less abstract and more grounded. Most vending machines don't sit in places for free. The space they occupy has value, even if it looks unused. Factories, offices, schools, hospitals, these are controlled environments. Allowing a vending machine inside them is a choice. In exchange for that access, location owners typically receive a share of the revenue. This arrangement is known as a commission or split. The exact percentage varies. Some locations take very little. Others take a significant portion. Some negotiate fixed monthly payments instead. What matters more than the specific number is understanding why the split exists at all. From the location's perspective, the machine isn't just convenience, it's a responsibility. They allow foot traffic to interact with equipment they don't own. They deal with complaints if the machine malfunctions. They provide electricity, space, and implicit oversight. The commission compensates them for that. For operators, this changes the math, but not in a dramatic way. Margins shrink slightly. Returns arrive more slowly. but access to a good location often matters more than keeping every dollar. A strong location with a reasonable split can outperform a free location with inconsistent traffic. This is one of the quiet trade-offs in the business. You're not maximizing profit per machine. You're optimizing reliability over time. Splits also create alignment. When a location benefits from the machine's performance, they're more likely to tolerate it, support it, and keep it in place. Machines that earn nothing tend to be removed quietly. Machines that earn something tend to stay. This dynamic encourages realism. A vending machine is not a standalone business. It's a partnership, even if it doesn't feel like one. Understanding this early prevents frustration. New operators sometimes fixate on the percentage instead of the outcome. A lower split in a bad location doesn't help. A higher split in a good location often does. Over time, experienced operators stop thinking in terms of margins alone. They think in terms of stability. Is the machine earning steadily? Is the location predictable? Is the relationship uncomplicated? Those questions matter more than squeezing every possible dollar from a single placement. Splits and commissions are part of why vending remains a modest business. They cap upside. They smooth volatility. They keep expectations realistic. Once those realities are accepted, the business becomes easier to evaluate. You stop asking whether a machine could earn more and start asking whether it earns enough to justify its place. That shift in thinking marks the transition from curiosity to actual understanding. By the time someone understands costs, margins, and splits, a pattern usually becomes clear. Vending machines don't move quickly. Returns arrive slowly. Growth is incremental. Progress is measured over months, not days. For people coming from more speculative side hustles, this can feel disappointing. But in vending, slowness isn't a flaw. It's the feature that makes the business workable. Fast returns usually come with volatility. They depend on timing, attention, or constant adjustment. Vending machines avoid that by design. Once a machine is placed in a stable location, its behavior changes very little from week to week. Sales fluctuate slightly. Inventory shifts gradually. Costs remain mostly predictable. Nothing spikes. Nothing collapses suddenly. This steadiness allows the business to exist without constant monitoring. You don't need to watch dashboards. You don't need to react to trends. You don't need to intervene daily. The machine earns when it earns. It rests when it rests. Slow returns also change how risk behaves. When money arrives gradually, mistakes reveal themselves early and gently. A bad product choice shows up as slow movement, not as a sudden loss. A weak location becomes apparent over time, giving the operator a chance to relocate rather than absorb a shock. This gives the business a kind of forgiveness. It doesn't punish small errors harshly. It allows learning without dramatic consequences. From an entrepreneurial perspective, this matters. Vending is less about finding an edge and more about avoiding instability. The goal isn't acceleration, it's sustainability. Slow returns also shape how operators scale. Expansion tends to be deliberate. One machine becomes two. Two become a small route. Each addition is evaluated based on performance, not optimism. This keeps growth aligned with reality. It also keeps the business emotionally manageable. There's no pressure to constantly reinvest or pivot. No feeling that momentum must be maintained at all costs. The business doesn't care about ambition. It responds only to placement, stocking, and time. For some people, this pace feels restrictive. For others, it feels grounding. Slow returns mean fewer surprises. They mean clearer expectations. They mean a business that fits around life rather than consuming it. Vending machines don't promise transformation. They offer consistency. And for operators who value predictability over upside, that consistency becomes the reason the business lasts. Once this is understood, the question shifts. Not, how fast can this grow? But, Does this earn steadily enough to keep? That question, quiet, practical, and patient, is the one vending machines are actually built to answer. By the time vending machines are evaluated seriously, one idea tends to replace many others. The machine matters less than where it sits. Two identical machines can produce completely different results based solely on location. This is why experienced operators often say that vending is not a machine business at all. It's a location business. At a basic level, locations fall into two broad categories: foot traffic locations and captive traffic locations. Foot traffic locations are places where people pass through freely: public buildings, transit areas, shared spaces with multiple options nearby. These locations may have high volume, but attention is scattered. People are moving. They're on their way somewhere else. They may have alternatives within reach. A vending machine in this environment competes quietly with everything around it. Captive traffic locations are different. Factories, warehouses, hospitals, office buildings with limited exits. In these spaces, people are present for long periods and options are constrained. Leaving to get food or drinks takes time. Breaks are scheduled. Movement is limited. Here, a vending machine doesn't compete for attention. It becomes part of the routine. The difference between these two environments is subtle but important. Foot traffic can look attractive at first glance. Lots of people, lots of movement. But volume alone doesn't guarantee consistency. Captive traffic often produces fewer transactions overall, but those transactions repeat more reliably. The same people, the same schedules, the same habits. For vending operators, this reliability matters more than spikes. A machine that sells modestly every day is easier to manage than one that sells unpredictably. Captive environments also simplify planning. You can learn when breaks happen, when shifts change, when restocking is most effective. This allows routes to be built efficiently. Foot traffic locations require more guesswork. Traffic patterns change. Usage fluctuates. Demand is harder to predict. That doesn't make them bad locations, just different ones. The mistake new operators often make is focusing on visibility instead of behavior. A machine doesn't need to be seen by everyone. It needs to be available to the right group at the right moments. Once this distinction becomes clear, location evaluation changes. You stop asking how many people walk past a machine. You start asking how often the same people return and under what constraints. Vending machines perform best when they align with routines that already exist. They don't create habits. They attach themselves to them. Understanding the difference between foot traffic and captive traffic is the first step toward placing machines intentionally rather than optimistically. And once location is understood this way, the rest of the business becomes easier to evaluate. Examples: in many office buildings, people spend long, uninterrupted stretches of time inside. Leaving the building requires effort. Breaks are short. Meetings run long. A vending machine in this environment serves a predictable need: mid-morning, mid-afternoon, occasionally late in the day. The demand isn't dramatic, but it's steady. Factories and warehouses tend to be even more consistent. Shifts are fixed. Break times are scheduled. Movement is controlled. In these settings, vending machines often become part of the rhythm of the workday. Employees don't browse. They already know what they want. Sales patterns repeat with little variation. This consistency makes forecasting easier and routes more efficient. Hospitals introduce a different kind of reliability. They operate continuously. Staff work long shifts. Visitors come and go at all hours. Cafeterias may close. Food options may be limited at night. Vending machines fill those gaps. They don't replace food services. They extend availability. Because hospitals never fully shut down, machines in these locations can perform steadily across all hours of the day. What unites offices, factories, and hospitals is not volume, but constraint. People are present for reasons unrelated to shopping. Their schedules are shaped by work or necessity. Leaving the environment is inconvenient or impractical. This creates a quiet form of demand, not impulsive, not emotional, situational. For operators, these environments reduce uncertainty. You don't rely on trends or events. You rely on routines. That reliability matters more than peak performance. A machine that earns consistently in a controlled environment often outperforms a machine in a busier but less predictable space. These locations also tend to support long-term placement. Once a machine is accepted into the environment, it's rarely removed unless it fails to function. It becomes part of the building. That stability reduces churn and relocation costs. It also allows operators to improve performance gradually, adjusting products, pricing, and service frequency based on observed behavior. The machine isn't competing for attention, it's responding to need. This distinction is subtle, but important. Vending machines don't succeed by being attractive. They succeed by being appropriate. Offices, factories, and hospitals provide environments where appropriateness matters more than visibility. And that's why, over time, these locations quietly outperform many others. When vending machines fail, they rarely do so dramatically. There's no sudden collapse, no obvious moment where everything goes wrong. Instead, performance tapers. Sales are lower than expected, inventory moves slowly, returns arrive, but not enough to justify the effort. At first, this can be easy to miss. A slow week looks like a normal fluctuation. A slow month feels temporary. The machine still functions. People still use it occasionally. Nothing is broken. But over time, a pattern emerges. Restocking takes longer than it should. Expired items become more common. The cost of servicing the machine begins to outweigh what it earns. This is how bad locations fail, not through crisis, but through quiet inefficiency. The location may not be hostile to vending. It's simply indifferent. People pass by but don't stop. They have other options. They're not constrained by time or access. The machine exists, but it isn't integrated into routine. From the outside, it looks fine. From the inside, from the operator's perspective, it slowly stops making sense. This gradual decline is actually a defining feature of the business. Vending doesn't punish mistakes harshly. A poor location doesn't usually result in immediate losses. It results in wasted time, fuel, labor, attention. This makes the business forgiving, but also deceptive. New operators sometimes hold on to weak locations too long because nothing forces a decision. The machine still earns something. It's not losing money outright, but opportunity cost accumulates. A machine tied up in a bad location can't be placed in a better one. Over time, experienced operators learn to recognize these signals. Low but consistent sales, no clear usage patterns, frequent leftover inventory. These aren't emergencies, they're indicators. Bad locations don't argue with you. They don't complain. They simply fail to justify themselves. This is why relocation is such a common part of vending operations. Machines move, not because they're broken, but because the environment never supported them. Understanding this early changes how the business feels. Failure isn't catastrophic, it's informational. A bad location teaches you what doesn't work, without demanding a dramatic response. And once that lesson is absorbed, the solution is usually simple. The machine is removed. The location returns to what it was before, and the operator moves on, quietly, just like the business itself. By the time someone looks closely at vending machines, it becomes clear that there isn't a single vending business. There are several, each with its own logic, pace, and trade-offs. What they share is a structure: unattended selling, predictable demand, routine maintenance. What differs is how that structure expresses itself. The most familiar category is snack and soda vending. These are the machines most people picture first. Chips, candy bars, bottled drinks. They're common because they work. The products are standardized. Demand is easy to understand. Suppliers are accessible. Snack and soda machines form the baseline for the industry. They're rarely the most profitable option per machine, but they're often the most straightforward. That simplicity makes them a common entry point. Operators don't need to educate customers. They don't need to experiment much. People already know what they're looking for. Sales patterns tend to stabilize quickly. This makes snack and soda vending useful for learning the business itself, how often to restock, how locations behave, how margins change over time. Other vending categories build on this same foundation, but introduce different constraints. Some focus on speed, some on price, some on specialization. What matters is not which category is best, but which one aligns with the operator's expectations. Snack and soda vending rewards consistency more than creativity. The machines don't change often. The products rotate slowly. Improvements are incremental. For some people, that feels limiting. For others, it's exactly what they want. The business doesn't ask for constant decision-making. It asks for maintenance and patience. This is why many long-term operators stay in this category. Not because it's exciting, but because it behaves predictably. As vending expanded, other models emerged. Bulk machines, coffee vending, micro markets, and specialty machines. Each of these adjusts the balance between effort, margin, and complexity. We'll look at those next. But it's important to understand snack and soda vending first, because it defines the core logic of the industry. Simple products, clear demand, unattended sales. Everything else in vending is a variation on that theme. Once that baseline is understood, it becomes easier to evaluate what changes and what stays the same as the business evolves into other forms. Bulk candy and gumball machines occupy a different place in the vending landscape. They're simpler, smaller, often overlooked. Instead of selling packaged products, these machines dispense loose items: gumballs, small candies, toy capsules. The transaction is straightforward. A coin goes in, a handle turns, a portion drops. Because of that simplicity, bulk machines are often the first exposure people have to vending as a business. They're inexpensive to acquire, easy to understand, easy to place. A single machine can sit near the entrance of a restaurant, laundromat, or small retail space with little disruption. From the outside, bulk vending looks almost trivial, but its economics are shaped by that simplicity. Returns per machine are low, very low. Sales happen slowly, sometimes sporadically. The appeal isn't in volume, it's in scale. Bulk vending relies on placing many machines across many locations, each earning small amounts over long periods of time. This creates a different relationship with time. A bulk machine isn't checked daily. It may not be serviced weekly. Inventory lasts a long time. Margins per item are high, but total revenue remains modest. This makes bulk vending suitable for a narrow group of operators. People who value minimal involvement. People who don't mind long gaps between collections. People who are comfortable with very small, steady returns. It also changes how locations are negotiated. Many bulk machines are placed without formal contracts. They're small enough to be tolerated easily. Sometimes proceeds are shared with the location. Sometimes a flat fee is paid. Sometimes the machine is allowed simply because it doesn't interfere with anything. This informal placement reduces friction, but it also limits upside. Bulk machines rarely become meaningful income on their own. They function better as a portfolio than as individual performers. This is why bulk vending is often misunderstood. It's not a shortcut to income. It's not a passive gold mine. It's a slow, distributed model that rewards patience and consistency. For some operators, that makes it appealing. For others, it feels too incremental. Bulk vending doesn't scale quickly. It scales quietly. And because the machines are small and unobtrusive, they tend to blend into environments even more completely than traditional vending machines. That invisibility mirrors the business itself. Coffee and beverage vending sits somewhere between traditional snack machines and full food service. The machines are larger, the expectations are higher, and the rhythm of the business changes. Unlike candy or packaged snacks, coffee introduces preparation. Even when fully automated, coffee vending machines handle multiple steps: heating water, grinding beans, mixing ingredients, dispensing cups. That added complexity brings new responsibilities. Machines need regular cleaning. Components wear out faster. Downtime is more noticeable. When a snack machine is empty, people move on. When a coffee machine is down, people notice. This changes how locations evaluate performance. Coffee vending tends to work best in places where people stay for long periods: office buildings, hospitals, factories with long shifts. In these environments, coffee isn't an impulse purchase. It's part of a routine. People expect consistency. They expect the machine to be ready when they are. From an operator's perspective, this raises the bar. Maintenance becomes more frequent. Service schedules tighten. Problems can't wait as long to be addressed. The margins reflect this added effort. Coffee vending often earns more per transaction than snacks. But costs rise as well. Supplies are more specialized. Machines are more expensive. Failures are more disruptive. This creates a different balance. Coffee vending rewards operators who are comfortable with hands-on upkeep and responsive service. It's less forgiving than bulk or snack vending, but it can justify that effort in the right environment. The rhythm is also different. Coffee sales cluster around specific times: early mornings, mid-morning breaks, sometimes late nights in hospitals or transit spaces. Demand spikes and falls in predictable waves. This predictability helps planning, but it also means missing a service window has clearer consequences. Coffee machines that aren't ready at the right time lose more than just a few sales. They lose trust. For some operators, this added responsibility feels like progress. The business becomes more involved, but also more central to daily routines. For others, it feels like friction. More points of failure, more urgency, less tolerance for delay. Coffee and beverage vending sits at an inflection point in the industry. It shows how far unattended commerce can stretch before it begins to resemble staffed service. Understanding this category helps clarify personal preference. Some operators want higher returns and accept higher demands. Others prefer simpler systems with fewer expectations. Neither approach is better in the abstract. They simply require different temperaments. Coffee vending doesn't replace snack or bulk vending. It adds another option, one that trades simp. Micromarkets represent a quiet turning point in the vending business. They don't look like traditional machines. There's no glass front with spirals or buttons, no single transaction at a time. Instead, a micromarket resembles a small, unattended convenience store: open shelving, coolers, a self-checkout kiosk. Customers pick up items, scan them, and pay before leaving. The core idea is still unattended commerce, but the execution changes significantly. Where vending machines restrict choice, micromarkets expand it. Fresh food, multiple brands, larger selections. This expansion shifts both opportunity and responsibility. Micromarkets tend to perform best in large, stable environments: corporate offices, distribution centers, hospitals with long shifts, places where enough people are present each day to justify the additional space and inventory. From a business perspective, micromarkets trade simplicity for scale. Revenue per location is usually higher than traditional vending, but so are costs. Installation requires more planning. Inventory management becomes more complex. Shrinkage becomes a real consideration. Because items are openly accessible, loss is built into the model. This doesn't make micro-markets fragile, but it does change how success is measured. Operators think less about individual machine performance and more about overall flow. Which items move quickly, which items spoil, which shelves earn their space. Micro-markets also change the relationship with the location. They require trust. The location is no longer just allowing a machine, it's hosting a small store. This often comes with formal agreements, longer commitments, and clearer expectations on both sides. Service frequency increases. Maintenance becomes more visible. Failures are more noticeable. A snack machine can be ignored for a while. A poorly maintained micro-market cannot. For some operators, this feels like progress. The business becomes more substantial, more integrated, more defensible. For others, it crosses a line. The simplicity that attracted them to vending begins to erode. The business starts to resemble retail, just without staff. Micro-markets aren't better or worse than traditional vending. They represent a different philosophy: less restriction, more choice, higher throughput, higher responsibility. They work best for operators who are comfortable managing systems that are closer to stores than machines. Understanding micro-markets helps clarify an important boundary. At a certain point, unattended commerce stops being about machines and starts being about space, inventory, and trust. Where an operator draws that line often determines which parts of the vending industry feel sustainable and which feel like too much. Specialty vending machines sit at the outer edge of the vending business. They don't aim to serve everyone. They're built to serve a specific situation, in a specific place, for a specific reason. These machines sell items that don't move in large volumes, but meet a precise need: electronics accessories, personal protective equipment, tools, flowers, health products, industrial supplies. The appeal of specialty vending is focus. Instead of competing for broad demand, these machines rely on context. An airport where chargers are needed, a hospital where protective gear is required, a factory floor where tools are consumed regularly. When the context is right, specialty machines can perform well. But when it isn't, they struggle quietly. Demand is narrower. Usage is situational. There's little room for error in placement. Unlike snack vending, people don't browse specialty machines casually. They approach them with intent, or not at all. This makes location even more critical. A specialty machine in the wrong environment can sit unused for long periods of time. Inventory doesn't rotate naturally. Products may expire, become obsolete, or lose relevance. Because the items are often higher value, mistakes are more expensive. The machines themselves tend to be more specialized as well. They're built for particular product sizes or dispensing methods. They're less flexible if demand changes. This reduces the ability to adapt. For operators, specialty vending demands clearer assumptions up front. Who will use this machine? How often? Under what conditions? Those questions don't always have reliable answers. This makes specialty vending attractive to a different kind of operator. People who understand a specific environment well. People with access to controlled locations. People who are solving a known problem rather than exploring a market. Specialty machines are rarely discovered accidentally. They're placed intentionally. When they work quietly and efficiently. When they don't fail dramatically. They simply don't get used. That lack of feedback can be misleading. A machine can look fine for months while producing almost no meaningful return. This makes patience important, but so does realism. Specialty vending isn't an upgrade from traditional vending. It's a trade-off. Higher potential per transaction, but fewer transactions overall. More specificity, but less flexibility. For some operators, that focus is exactly what they want. For others, it introduces too much dependency on circumstances they can't easily control. Understanding specialty vending clarifies an important boundary in the business. The more specialized the product, the more dependent the business becomes on environment and timing. That doesn't make it fragile, but it does make it precise. And precision in vending requires a different kind of patience. At a certain point, vending stops feeling like a concept and starts behaving like a collection of assets. This is an important transition. Early on, it's easy to think of vending machines as ideas about convenience, ideas about location, ideas about what people might want. But machines don't respond to ideas. They respond to use. A vending machine earns or it doesn't. It performs or it doesn't. It either justifies its place over time or it quietly doesn't. Thinking of machines as assets changes how decisions are made. Assets are evaluated, not imagined. They're measured by output, reliability, and longevity, not by potential or excitement. A machine doesn't care how clever the concept was behind its placement. It only reflects the behavior of the environment it's in. This is why experienced operators talk less about innovation and more about upkeep. A well-maintained machine in an average location often outperforms a neglected machine in a promising one. Assets reward consistency. They depreciate. They require service. They occasionally fail. None of this is surprising. What surprises people is how little creativity affects outcomes once the machine is in place. Changing the wrap doesn't change demand. Rearranging buttons rarely alters behavior. Small tweaks rarely move the needle. What matters is whether the machine is stocked, functional, and present when demand occurs. This can feel limiting to people who enjoy experimentation. Vending doesn't offer many levers to pull. Most of the work happens before placement, choosing the environment, the category, the expectations. After that, the asset simply needs to be maintained. This is where vending becomes emotionally simpler. There's less second-guessing, less interpretation. A machine doesn't provide ambiguous feedback. Sales are either there or they aren't. Over time, operators begin to think less about individual machines and more about portfolios. Which machines justify their space? Which ones quietly underperform? Which ones should be moved or replaced? This way of thinking reduces attachment. Machines aren't projects. They aren't expressions. They're tools. When they work, they're kept. When they don't, they're removed. That detachment is not indifference. It's discipline. Treating machines as assets prevents overinvestment, financial and emotional. It also makes the business easier to sustain. There's no pressure to constantly improve or reinvent. No sense that something must always be optimized. The machine's role is narrow. Provide access, accept payment, dispense reliably. When that role is fulfilled, the asset has done its job. Understanding this changes how vending feels. It stops being about ideas that might work and becomes about systems that already do. And once that shift happens, the business becomes less exciting, but more durable. Every vending machine changes over time. Not all at once, and not in ways that are immediately obvious. Wear shows up gradually, buttons respond a little more slowly. Dispensing mechanisms lose precision. Cooling systems work harder than they used to. None of this feels urgent at first. The machine still functions. Products still sell. Money still accumulates. But the asset is aging. Depreciation in vending is not just financial. It's physical. Machines are exposed to constant use, temperature changes, and environments they weren't designed to be delicate in. Office hallways, factory floors, public spaces. Each interaction leaves a small trace. Over time, those traces add up. From an accounting perspective, depreciation reduces the book value of the machine. From an operational perspective, it increases friction. Repairs become more frequent. Parts become harder to find. Downtime stretches slightly longer. None of these changes are dramatic. That's what makes them easy to ignore. New operators often underestimate this phase of the business. They focus on purchase price and early performance, assuming that maintenance will be occasional and minor. In reality, wear is constant. A machine that earns steadily also wears steadily. This doesn't mean older machines are bad investments. In fact, many experienced operators prefer them. Older machines are fully depreciated. Their cost has already been absorbed. Their behavior is predictable. What matters is not age. but how wear is managed. Operators learn which components fail first, which repairs are worth making, which machines should be retired rather than fixed. This knowledge doesn't come from planning. It comes from repetition. Depreciation also influences how expansion feels. Adding machines increases exposure to wear. More assets mean more points of failure. Growth amplifies maintenance. This is another reason vending rarely scales aggressively. The business grows sideways, not upward. More routes, more machines, more routine, but also more wear to manage. Understanding depreciation helps set realistic expectations. Machines don't improve with time. They don't compound in value. They earn while they're useful and decline when they're not. That decline isn't a failure. It's part of the model. Vending machines aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to be useful long enough to justify their place. Seeing wear as normal, rather than as a problem, changes how decisions are made. Repairs are weighed calmly. Replacement becomes an option, not a crisis. The machine's role is temporary, even if it lasts for years, and accepting that impermanence is what allows the business to continue without frustration. At some point, every vending machine stops working the way it's supposed to, not completely, not all at once. A bill acceptor rejects a note it should take. A spiral turns, but doesn't release the product. A payment system goes offline briefly. These moments are not exceptions. They're part of the operating environment. What separates experienced operators from new ones is not how often problems occur, but how they respond to them. Vending machines require a specific kind of tolerance, not indifference, but proportion. Not every issue needs immediate action, and not every malfunction threatens the business. A jammed product affects a few sales. A dead machine affects many. Learning the difference matters. New operators often treat every issue as urgent. They rush to fix small problems that would have resolved themselves or could have waited until the next service visit. Over time, this creates fatigue. Experienced operators develop a different sense of priority. They focus on failures that stop transactions entirely. Power loss, payment system outages, cooling failures. These issues interrupt the machine's role. Other problems are noted, not panicked over. A slow-moving button, a misaligned product, a cosmetic flaw. The machine still works, the asset still earns. This tolerance is learned through repetition. Machines teach operators where attention is actually required, not through instruction, but through consequence. When a machine stops earning, it demands response. When it earns less than expected, it invites observation. Breakdowns also reinforce a central truth of the business. Vending is not passive. The machine operates without presence, but it does not operate without care. Someone has to check in. Someone has to respond when failure crosses a threshold. The business doesn't punish neglect immediately. It punishes it gradually. Sales dip, trust erodes, locations lose patience. This gradual feedback loop gives operators room to adjust. You're not reacting to emergencies. You're managing reliability. Over time, repairs become less emotional. They're not setbacks. They're costs of keeping an asset useful. Parts are replaced. Machines are serviced. Some are retired. None of this signals failure. It signals continuation. Tolerance also applies to expectations. Machines will not perform perfectly. Locations will not be ideal. Returns will fluctuate. The operators who last are the ones who accept this variance without trying to eliminate it entirely. Vending doesn't reward perfection. It rewards steadiness. Repairs, breakdowns, and wear are not interruptions to the business. They are the business. Understanding which issues require action and which can simply be noted and revisited is what allows vending to remain manageable over time. Once that tolerance is developed, the business becomes quieter in a different way, not because nothing goes wrong, but because fewer things feel urgent. And that shift is what makes long-term operation possible. For most vending operators, the business reveals itself most clearly during restocking. This is where theory becomes routine. Restocking isn't dramatic. It doesn't involve big decisions or moments of insight. It's a sequence of repeated actions, done the same way each time. Open the machine, check inventory levels, replace what's sold, remove what isn't moving, close the door, move on. The work happens on a route, a set of locations visited in a familiar order. Often the same buildings, often the same parking spots, often the same hallways. Over time, these routes become predictable. You learn how long each stop takes, which machines need attention, which ones usually don't. Some visits are quick, others take longer. But the pattern stays mostly the same. This repetition is not accidental. Vending works because demand is routine. People buy the same things at similar times. They follow habits shaped by schedules and environments. Restocking aligns with that rhythm. Operators don't chase sales. They respond to usage. This is one of the ways vending differs from many other small businesses. There's no daily push to improve performance, no constant adjustment. Most of the work is maintenance, keeping machines filled enough, not full, not empty. That balance matters. Overstocking ties up inventory and increases spoilage. Understocking misses sales and frustrates users. With time, operators develop a feel for this balance. They don't calculate it precisely, they sense it. Restocking also provides feedback. A machine that empties quickly tells a story. A machine that barely changes does too. These signals aren't loud. They don't demand immediate response. They accumulate quietly, visit by visit. This is why vending feels different emotionally than many businesses. There are no big wins to celebrate, no obvious failures to panic over. Progress is measured in small confirmations. The machine is still working, the products are still moving, the route still makes sense. For some people, this feels dull. For others, it feels grounding. The routine creates predictability. You know when you'll work. You know what you'll do. You know roughly what to expect. That predictability allows vending to coexist with other parts of life. It doesn't dominate attention. It occupies a defined space. Restocking becomes less about effort and more about rhythm. The same motions, repeated regularly, keeping the system functioning. And over time, those motions stop feeling like tasks. They become the shape of the business itself. Most vending work happens when other people aren't around. Not because it has to, but because that's when it fits best. Early mornings, late evenings, quiet hours between shifts. These windows aren't chosen for efficiency alone. They're chosen to avoid friction. An empty building is easier to move through. Hallways are clear. Doors open without interruption. Machines can be serviced without anyone waiting. For operators, this timing reduces pressure. There's no audience, no one watching, no one asking questions. The work becomes procedural rather than social. This is especially true in offices, factories, and hospitals. During peak hours, these spaces are busy. People move with purpose. Breaks are short. Stopping to restock a machine during those times creates obstacles for everyone involved. Outside those hours, the same spaces feel different. Lights are dimmer, noise drops, movement slows. The building shifts from being active to being functional. This is when vending fits most naturally. Machines are opened, refilled, and closed without interrupting anyone's routine. This timing also reinforces predictability. Routes are run at roughly the same time each day or week. Inventory depletion lines up with service visits. Over time, operators learn exactly when machines need attention. Not too early, not too late. Just enough to keep them functioning smoothly. Early hours also create separation between vending and the rest of life. The work is done. Then it's over. There are no lingering conversations, no follow-ups. Once the route is finished, the machines return to operating on their own. This makes vending easier to contain. It doesn't spill into the rest of the day. The business occupies a defined window of time and then recedes. For some people, this timing is inconvenient. Early mornings aren't appealing to everyone. For others, it's a benefit. The work happens before the day begins or after it slows down. That makes it compatible with other responsibilities. Jobs, families, other ventures. Empty buildings also offer clearer feedback. A machine that's nearly empty stands out immediately. A machine that barely changed tells a different story. There's no noise to distract from those signals. You see the business clearly because nothing else is happening. This is where vending's pace becomes obvious. There's no rush, no crowd, just the machine, the inventory, and the outcome of the last cycle. The timing doesn't make the business exciting. It makes it manageable. And in vending, manageability matters more than momentum. Over time, vending routes stop feeling like travel and start feeling like navigation through familiar space. The same hallways, the same corners, the same turns. What was once unfamiliar becomes routine. You stop noticing the layout of buildings. You stop thinking about where machines are located. Your body remembers before your mind does. This familiarity reduces effort in a quiet way. You don't search for the machine. You walk directly to it. You don't think about where to park. You already know. Each location becomes a known quantity. This matters more than it seems. When environments become familiar, the work requires less attention. Not because it's ignored, but because it no longer demands interpretation. You're not solving new problems. You're confirming existing patterns. This reduces mental load. The machine is where it always is. The door opens the same way. The lighting behaves predictably. Nothing surprises you. That predictability allows focus to narrow to what actually matters. Inventory levels. Where? Small deviations from normal behavior. When everything else stays the same, changes stand out clearly. A machine empties faster than usual. A hallway is quieter than normal. A door that's usually open is locked. These details register immediately because the background is stable. Familiar hallways also change how time is experienced. Stops feel shorter. Routes feel smoother. There's less friction between locations. You move through the work rather than stopping to think about it. This is one reason vending can feel manageable over long periods. The business doesn't constantly introduce novelty. It repeats. And repetition, when paired with familiarity, reduces strain. This doesn't mean the work becomes automatic. It means effort is applied selectively. Attention goes to machines that need it, not to spaces that don't. Over time, this familiarity creates a kind of spatial memory. You know which machines tend to jam, which locations are sensitive to timing, which stops rarely change. That knowledge isn't written down. It's carried. This is how vending becomes embodied work, not complicated, not demanding, just consistent. The hallways don't become interesting, they become known. And once they're known, the work shifts from navigation to maintenance. That shift is subtle, but it's one of the reasons vending can coexist with other parts of life. The business doesn't fight for attention. It fits into it. And in familiar hallways, that fit becomes clear. Over time, vending routes stop feeling like travel and start feeling like navigation through familiar space. The same hallways, the same corners, the same turns. What was once unfamiliar becomes routine. You stop noticing the layout of buildings. You stop thinking about where machines are located. Your body remembers before your mind does. This familiarity reduces effort in a quiet way. You don't search for the machine. You walk directly to it. You don't think about where to park. You already know. Each location becomes a known quantity. This matters more than it seems. When environments become familiar, the work requires less attention. Not because it's ignored, but because it no longer demands interpretation. You're not solving new problems. You're confirming existing patterns. This reduces mental load. The machine is where it always is. The door opens the same way. The lighting behaves predictably. Nothing surprises you. That predictability allows focus to narrow to what actually matters. Inventory levels. Where? Small deviations from normal behavior. When everything else stays the same, changes stand out clearly. A machine empties faster than usual. A hallway is quieter than normal. A door that's usually open is locked. These details register immediately because the background is stable. Familiar hallways also change how time is experienced. Stops feel shorter. Routes feel smoother. There's less friction between locations. You move through the work rather than stopping to think about it. This is one reason vending can feel manageable over long periods. The business doesn't constantly introduce novelty. It repeats. And repetition, when paired with familiarity, reduces strain. This doesn't mean the work becomes automatic. It means effort is applied selectively. Attention goes to machines that need it, not to spaces that don't. Over time, this familiarity creates a kind of spatial memory. You know which machines tend to jam, which locations are sensitive to timing, which stops rarely change. That knowledge isn't written down. It's carried. This is how vending becomes embodied work, not complicated, not demanding, just consistent. The hallways don't become interesting, they become known. And once they're known, the work shifts from navigation to maintenance. That shift is subtle, but it's one of the reasons vending can coexist with other parts of life. The business doesn't fight for attention. It fits into it. And in familiar hallways, that fit becomes clear. Most people don't enter the vending business with a plan to scale quickly. They enter cautiously, often with a single machine, sometimes with a used one, usually placed somewhere familiar, a workplace, a friend's business, a small location that feels low risk. This is the most common starting point, even if it's rarely talked about that way. The DIY path in vending isn't about ambition, it's about testing fit. New operators want to see how the work feels, how often machines need attention, how intrusive the responsibility becomes. Starting small makes those answers visible without committing too much. Buying one machine instead of 5 changes the emotional stakes. Mistakes are manageable. Learning happens quietly. Nothing needs to be justified. This is important because vending isn't difficult, but it is specific. The work has a texture that isn't obvious from the outside. Carrying inventory, opening machines, handling small amounts of cash, responding to minor problems without urgency. Some people discover they like this rhythm. Others realize quickly that they don't. The DIY path allows that realization to happen early. There's also a practical reason most people start this way. Vending doesn't reward speed. Adding machines before understanding locations, routes, and maintenance usually creates more problems than progress. One machine teaches you more than a spreadsheet ever could. You learn how long restocking takes, how sales fluctuate, how little drama there actually is. You also learn what doesn't matter. The machine's appearance matters less than its function. Small pricing changes rarely transform performance. The business doesn't respond to enthusiasm, it responds to presence. This is why many experienced operators discourage aggressive entry. Not because growth is bad, but because the business reveals itself slowly. A DIY approach respects that pace. It allows knowledge to accumulate naturally. One location becomes 2. 2 become a short route. Each step only happens when the previous one feels stable. This doesn't look impressive from the outside. There are no milestones to announce, no visible momentum. But internally, it creates confidence. You know what you're taking on because you've already done it. The DIY path isn't about building something big. It's about building something understandable. Once the business makes sense at a small scale, it becomes easier to decide whether it belongs in your life at all. Some people stop there. 1 or 2 machines, quietly earning, quietly maintained. Others continue. But almost everyone who stays in vending long-term starts the same way, slowly, deliberately, with just enough commitment to learn and not enough to regret. Most vending machines in operation today were not purchased new. They were bought used. This isn't a temporary condition or a workaround. It's how the industry actually functions. New machines exist, but they are not the default choice for most operators. The reason is simple. Vending machines are durable assets. They're built to operate for years in public spaces with minimal supervision. A machine that's been in service for a decade can still perform its core function reliably if it's been maintained. Used machines offer something new ones don't: known behavior. A machine that's already been operating has a track record. Its weaknesses are visible. Its quirks are already present. There's less uncertainty. New machines arrive clean and modern, but they also introduce unknowns. New components fail in unfamiliar ways. New payment systems add complexity. Repairs may require specialized parts or service. Used machines tend to be simpler. They've already survived early failures. They've already been repaired once or twice. Their remaining lifespan is easier to estimate. Cost matters too, but it's not just about price. Buying used lowers the emotional stakes. If a machine underperforms, the loss is limited. If a location doesn't work out, the machine can be moved without regret. This flexibility is important in a business built on trial and placement. Used machines also align better with the DIY path. They encourage learning through operation rather than research. You don't need the best machine, you need a workable one. Over time, operators learn which features matter and which ones don't. Cashless payment systems can be added later. Cosmetic upgrades rarely change performance. Reliability matters more than appearance. The used market reflects this knowledge. Machines circulate between operators as needs change. Someone exits the business. Someone upgrades equipment. Someone reduces routes. Machines move. This creates a quiet ecosystem. Vending equipment doesn't disappear when it's no longer new. It changes hands. That circulation keeps entry accessible. It also reinforces a core truth of the business. Vending is not about owning the newest technology. It's about deploying tools that are good enough in the right environments. A used machine that works is more valuable than a new one that doesn't fit. Understanding this prevents overinvestment early on. It keeps expectations grounded. Buying used doesn't mean cutting corners. It means respecting the actual economics of the business. Machines are not status symbols. They are working objects. They earn slowly. They wear gradually. They are replaced when it makes sense. Seen this way, the dominance of used machines isn't surprising. It's simply the industry behaving realistically. It teaches patience. A machine in a busy one can create unrealistic assumptions. Neither is wrong, but each shapes perception. This is why experienced operators caution against chasing great locations first. A great location amplifies everything, including stress. Service becomes more urgent. Performance is watched more closely. Small issues feel larger. A modest location keeps the signal clear. If sales are slow, it's understandable. If sales improve, it's meaningful. Finding a first location is less about persuasion and more about fit. Does the environment support unattended selling? Are people present long enough to notice the machine? Is access predictable? These questions matter more than foot traffic numbers. The first placement doesn't need to last forever. It's not a commitment. It's a test. Machines move. Locations change. What matters is starting somewhere that allows learning to happen quietly. Once the first location is in place, the business stops being theoretical. Restocking becomes real. Timing becomes clear. Effort becomes measurable. Confidence grows not from success, but from familiarity. The machine becomes part of a routine. And once that routine exists, finding the second location becomes easier. not because it's simpler, but because it's understood. The first location isn't about proving anything. It's about beginning. In vending, beginning well usually means beginning small, in a place that allows the business to reveal itself without pressure. Most people who enter the vending business do not fail. They quit. This distinction matters. Machines don't break all at once. Locations don't disappear overnight. The business doesn't collapse. It simply stops feeling worth continuing. The first reason is expectation. Vending is often imagined as passive income, something that runs quietly in the background. In reality, it requires regular presence, restocking, checking machines, responding to small problems. None of this is difficult, but it is persistent. People who expect the business to feel automatic often feel disappointed when it doesn't. The work isn't heavy, it's repetitive. That repetition becomes the second reason people leave. Logistics fatigue sets in quietly. Carrying inventory, driving routes, opening the same doors. The effort is modest, but it never disappears. For some, this becomes irritating. Not because it's hard, but because it's constant. The business doesn't evolve much over time. There are no milestones to chase, no visible growth moments. Each week looks similar to the last. This leads to the third and most overlooked reason people quit. Vending is a low dopamine business. There are no big wins, no dramatic payoffs, no feedback loops that reward excitement or urgency. Money arrives in small amounts. Progress is incremental. For people used to stimulation, notifications, metrics, sudden changes, vending can feel unrewarding. Nothing spikes. Nothing demands attention. The business doesn't respond to enthusiasm. It responds to routine. This creates a mismatch. People who enjoy novelty lose interest. People who enjoy maintenance tend to stay. This isn't a flaw in the business. It's a filter. Vending rewards a narrow temperament. People who value predictability. People who are comfortable with steady effort. People who don't need the work to feel important. Most people don't realize this until they're already in. They expect the business to become more interesting over time. It doesn't. It becomes clearer. Once that clarity arrives, a decision follows. Some people step away without drama. They sell machines. They move on. Others stay, not because the business excites them, but because it fits. Vending doesn't ask for ambition. It asks for tolerance. And for the people who can offer that, the business doesn't grow quickly. It simply continues, quietly, reliably, without asking for much attention at all. Growth. They're counting on continuation. The second reason is routine. Over time, the work becomes familiar. The same routes, the same machines, the same movements. That repetition reduces mental effort. There's no need to reinvent processes or chase new opportunities. The business asks for presence, not creativity. For people who value structure, this becomes comforting rather than limiting. The routine marks time. A machine restocked is a task completed. A route finished is a day defined. Nothing spills into the next day unnecessarily. The work stays contained. The third reason people stay is quiet ownership. Vending machines are owned assets. They don't rely on audiences, algorithms, or attention. They don't require persuasion. Once placed, they earn simply by being available. This creates a different relationship with work. Ownership doesn't feel performative. There's nothing to explain or promote. The machines exist. They do their job. By the time vending machines are understood as a business, they also begin to look like something else. Infrastructure. They appear in places where people are already required to be. Schools, hospitals, transit hubs. Not because they're exciting, but because they're useful. In these environments, food is not a destination. It's a necessity that needs to be met efficiently. Vending machines fill the space between services. They operate when cafeterias close. They serve people between schedules. They remain available when attention is elsewhere. This makes them different from restaurants and even from retail. They don't invite engagement. They don't create atmosphere. They simply remain accessible. Over time, this reliability changes how people relate to them. Vending machines stop being choices and start being assumptions. They're expected to be there. When they are, nothing is noticed. When they aren't, the absence is felt immediately. This is how infrastructure behaves. It works best when it fades into the background. Feeding people quietly is part of that role. Vending machines don't ask questions. They don't require conversation. They don't evaluate intent. They accept payment and dispense reliably. That lack of interaction matters in institutional spaces. Hospitals operate around urgency and fatigue. Schools operate around structure and time limits. Transit hubs operate around movement. In all of these places, attention is already committed elsewhere. Vending machines respect that. They don't compete for focus. They don't demand acknowledgement. They perform a function and recede. This is automation without attention. The machines don't adapt or persuade. They don't optimize continuously. They execute the same task repeatedly within defined limits. That constraint is what makes them dependable. Their role is narrow by design. When vending machines are viewed this way, their persistence makes sense. They don't survive because people love them. They survive because systems rely on them. They are placed where failure would be noticed and success would not. That is the defining trait of infrastructure. Vending machines are not central to daily life, but they support it quietly. They allow people to stay where they are, continue what they're doing, and move on without interruption. In this way, vending machines become part of the background systems that hold modern spaces together. Uncelebrated, unremarkable, necessary, and because they ask for so little attention, they remain. As this documentary comes to its end, nothing is meant to resolve. Vending machines don't conclude. They don't arrive anywhere. They simply continue. When attention drifts away, when the building empties, when the last light in an office hallway dims, the machines remain where they are, still powered, still stocked, still waiting. That quiet persistence has been the subject of this entire story. Not growth, not disruption, not optimization, just continuation. Throughout this film, we've followed vending machines as systems, machines that earn slowly, repeat predictably, and operate without needing to be admired. They don't ask for belief. They don't promise transformation. They exist inside routines, supporting them without comment. For some people, this makes vending machines forgettable. For others, it makes them trustworthy. There is no moment where the business suddenly changes, no finish line to cross. The same machines will be there tomorrow and the day after that, working quietly in the background of other lives. That's not a flaw. That's the design. If you're listening late at night, or resting, or letting your thoughts drift, there's nothing here you need to remember. You don't need to hold on to the details. You don't need to reach a conclusion. The systems we've talked about will keep running whether they're remembered or not. That's how infrastructure works. It supports life without becoming the focus of it. If this documentary helped you relax or slow down or think quietly about the unnoticed systems around you, you're welcome to support the channel. You can like the video, subscribe for more long-form sleep documentaries, or leave a short review or comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. Your city, your state, or simply home. There's no obligation. These videos are made to exist whether or not they're acknowledged, much like the systems they describe. And now, as this one comes to a close, there's nothing more you need to do. Roots end. Machines close their doors. Lights soften behind glass. The work pauses until the next cycle. You can let the day go. Thank you for spending this quiet time here. Good night.
Lights are on behind the glass. one's here, the hallways pass. Coins and cards, a quiet sound. Something steady waiting around. Nothing calling out your name, nothing rushing, nothing changed. Still working, still in play, earning time at its own pace. No stories told, no scenes to steal, just something here that stays real. The same machine, another night. Soft electric, patient light. No one watching, no one needs anything more than what it is. Still working, still in place. No demand, no need to raise. Small returns, days repeat, systems hum while we sleep. If you don't look, it's still there. If you forget, it doesn't care. Still working, out of sight, doing fine through the night.